Oh, geez.
Excuse me, I'm throwing.
Welcome. We are live with breaking news. This is just coming in, and it is a huge victory for animal lovers who care about wildlife in Los Angeles and elsewhere. A judge has just ruled that the environmental groups win in a legal challenge to the Ballona Wetlands so-called restoration project, which the court ruled is really not a restoration. This is an absolute huge victory for the animals you're looking at on your screen. We want to go straight out to some of the attorneys who made this happen, starting with Jamie Hall. Jamie, bring us up to date. What exactly happened and how did you make it happen?
Well, after a long battle, over a year long, we had a trial before Judge Chalfant in Superior Court. It was a challenge to the environmental impact report for this so-called restoration project. We actually had trial last week, and we are waiting on pins and needles for the judge to issue his decision as to whether or not this project could move forward, about whether the environmental analysis was adequate. And yesterday, the 67-page single-spaced opinion came out, and it was in our favor. The judge declared that the EIR was fundamentally flawed, and that this CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, had failed to commit to mitigation measures necessary to ensure that the wildlife species would not be harmed. And so the judge has ordered the EIR to be invalidated, and he's further ordering an injunction prohibiting the state from moving forward with this project or doing anything that may change the physical environment until they have complied with the California Environmental Quality Act.
I can't tell you how big this is. We have been fighting this. I grew up in this area. I've lived in this area for 32 years. I didn't know that there was a giant gas storage facility a mile beneath the Ballona Wetlands. I only found out about it by attending a protest outside Playa Vista in that neighborhood at, if you know LA, Jefferson and Lincoln. This is right near the Pacific Ocean in Playa del Rey. And I was shocked to learn that there's a giant gas storage facility about, way underneath the wetlands. And of course, pipes are required to bring that gas up to the surface, and those pipes crumble. So critics have said that the true agenda for this quote unquote restoration that would wipe out the home for 1,700 species, including threatened and endangered species, is to allow the fossil fuel industry to upgrade their crumbling gas storage facility. I want to go straight out to Marcia Hanscom. Marcia, you have led this battle from the very beginning. In people terms, what are we talking about here? What is the impact?
Well, the impact is that this is one of the few places where people in this very dense area of Los Angeles have a place to relax a little bit. I hear people all the time saying, oh, when I drive through, I'm able to, my shoulders just relax because it's open space, it's wildlife, it's nature. And people need that for, relief from the urban stresses. So for now, these species are protected. And, we have more to do, of course, but to make sure that this sticks and that that the governor withdraws this project. It's horrible. We're really going to be appealing to him. We're going to be putting a letter together this week to ask him to officially withdraw this project. But it's also, one of the other issues that hopefully one of the attorneys might talk about is the flood risk. That's a very big issue that the court called out. And that is also very, very concerning to the public and the people who live, work, and even drive through the area.
I want to go to our other amazing attorney, Bryan Pease. But first, I want to play a clip of a fundraiser that was held to support the work of these attorneys. Both of these attorneys attended the fundraiser, and it was headlined by James Cromwell, the Oscar-nominated actor who was currently on the hit show Succession, and who predicted correctly, "We will win."
We will win.
Succession actor James Cromwell was the headliner at a packed Venice, California fundraiser. More than 200 Los Angeles residents, along with a very social pig, partied with a purpose. Why the animal representative? Because people at this party love animals and want to save the special place where 1,700 species live, LA's last coastal wetlands. The Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve in Playa del Rey is now threatened by a very controversial bulldozing plan that would destroy the home of thousands of wild animals.
Marcia and a few people came to me at some event and said, listen, did you know about the Ballona Wetlands? And I'd never heard of the Ballona Wetlands. And she described it and said, would you come down and see the wetlands, which I did. And it's this. And it was moving, it was perfect. And I really wanted to be, I said, I'm in. Whatever you want me to do, I'm in.
Now, this ruling that just happened, basically, just to quote from City News Service, I want to lay it out. Then we're going to go to Bryan Pease to really unpack it. A judge Wednesday ruled in favor of an environmental group whose members alleged the state's approval of a state quote unquote restoration project for the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve near LAX failed to properly protect wildlife species. So he spoke about the wildlife, the judge did. And Los Angeles Superior Court Judge James Chalfant, 67-page opinion in favor of Protect Ballona Wetlands, also stated engineers' designs for excavating and bulldozing more than 2 million cubic yards of soil and removing levees did not use the correct flood risk standards. So Bryan Pease, how big is this? You're an environmental attorney, has fought many, many battles on behalf of habitat, wildlife. How big a decision is this?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So this is a very important decision for stopping what was a fundamentally flawed environmental impact report. The thing to keep in mind is that this is not the time for activists to think that this is the end and we can just, and now the project is stopped. Now more than ever, we need folks to mobilize and to oppose this project politically, because it's not going away. CDFW is not going away. The environmental impact report was struck down because it was just because of the staggering arrogance that they did not put the public on notice of the correct. They fudged the numbers. They used a flood control, as mentioned, that the flood control figures that were used they knew were flawed and were wrong, and then they just went in after the fact and tried to just plug in different numbers, which would have changed the entire scope of the project, the size of the levees, the habitat adjustment, everything. So CDFW, I mean, they're a corrupt industry captured agency. They're not going to stop. They're going to want to redo the environmental impact report. And you have to remember that CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, does not allow us to stop a project just because it's harmful to the environment. The point of CEQA is to give the public and decision makers notice of what's actually being approved. CDFW here, the agency responsible, the state agency that is in charge of this project, did not put the public on proper notice. The environmental impact report was flawed, so we got that thrown out. But they now get to go back to the drawing board and try to submit a new environmental impact report. And now is the time to really put the pressure on state officials. Marcia mentioned calling on the governor to withdraw the project. Now is really the time for people to stand up and really go after this project politically, because it is so destructive and so extreme. I don't think the public understands the vastness of what's being proposed here, which is to completely bulldoze and destroy everything that's there on this fictional promise that somehow, sometime far in the future, there's going to be restored additional habitat in the future. That's what they're proposing to do. They used the wrong figures, the wrong numbers. They didn't commit, as Jamie said, to actual standards for the species restoration. But if they go back and they redo it, they're going to try to do this project. They're still going to try to go forward with this project. So we need to definitely mobilize and keep the pressure on.
Okay, so excellent point, Bryan Pease. Jamie Hall, what is the timeline? In other words, there's a lot of tears of joy and cheers, but what do we have to brace ourselves for in terms of what they could do next?
Well, I mean, there's some procedural things that have to happen in this case. I mean, we have to prepare what's called a judgment. The judge has to sign the judgment, and that's when this order becomes effective. But in our state, any party can appeal. So it's entirely possible that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will appeal to the Second District Court of Appeal. And again, kind of following up with what Bryan said, our hope is that the activist community, that the environmental community, people who care about these issues will write to the governor and other people in power and tell them, hey, we want you to abandon the project. And one of the things I want to point out here is that this is just an extreme example of, money burning a hole in someone's pockets. There is a better way to improve the wetlands. Yes, there are some invasive species. Yes, there are things that can be done to improve the wetlands, to make them a better place for wildlife. But we do not have to engage in this extreme bulldozing in order to achieve those goals. And so that's sort of the messaging that needs to go out to the governor, so that they can have a real hard look about this project, whether or not they want to pursue this project, whether there might be a more feasible and an environmentally responsible means to improve the wetlands that doesn't require a huge gamble. This is a huge gamble that we're placing on, quote, restoring the wetlands. I mean, one of the outrageous things that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife said in this case was that they were just going to trap any of the species and relocate them to appropriate places during the course of this bulldozing. Does anyone actually believe that this department is going to trap all of those species and relocate them? The truth of the matter is that some of these species are just going to die. They're going to die.
A lot of them would die. I mean, give me a break. Trap an owl, trap an egret, I live in this area. I see these animals every day. And this is why they say charity begins in the home. When I was alerted to it, I didn't even know there was a gas storage facility. 90% of the people in our neighborhood do not know there's a gas storage facility under the wetlands. And when I was made aware of that, and every day I see these species, I see raccoons, skunks, egrets, pelicans. I saw dozens of pelicans right at the mouth of the Ballona Wetlands just the other day, having a great time. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you don't know what they've got planned for you. There's no way they can catch these animals. And they changed their tune. I was at one of these public hearings, and we actually asked some of the proponents making a presentation in favor of this, what happens to the animals? And they literally said, quote, oh, they can go across the street. Across the street where? To the Home Depot parking lot? That's across the street. It's absolute. They're insulting our intelligence, okay? And always follow the money. And why is this so important? Because what happens in LA spreads to the rest of the country. And I know from getting calls, there are fake restoration plans all over the United States, putting bike paths where nobody could bike across 100 miles without passing out maybe one person, an Olympian. But it gives the developers a chance to create the bypass and give and the bike path and give contracts to their friends. And we've got to build the toilets and the water fountains. And it's all about development. It's all about money. And that's why what happened was so important. It sends a message to these developers who look at any wildlife habitat as empty land to be exploited, that they are wrong. Not only are they morally bankrupt, but a judge might do something about it. Marcia, what are your thoughts on the real agendas here?
Well, I think you're right. Several people have said follow the money. And there's been a huge amount of bond money in Sacramento that a number of people have had their eyes on. And in fact, one of the community groups that supports this project, the former president of that group, got several $1 million for his engineering firm to help plan this project. So there, there's been more than $12 million in bond money has been spent by the state of California just to plan this project, and then they didn't even use the correct standards. So I think that, and this project is anticipated, if it were to go forward, to cost more than $250 million. So there is definitely money involved. And of course, if the fossil fuel industry wants to upgrade its facility, this gas facility, when we should be shutting it down if we are really concerned about climate change, of course, there's money in that too. And that's why they would want to upgrade their facility when we should be sunsetting it.
And I want to say that we invite the fossil fuel industry or any developers or any officials connected with this process. And I want to bring up one other point, because when I talk to people in the neighborhood, they say, oh, what about the homeless encampments and all the trailers that they've allowed to line the perimeter? Well, exactly. Allowed. Now, I have to go back to Marcia on this. CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, correct me if I'm wrong, supervises this area. And I know when we were live when an environmentalist named Molly Baszler went to the location where these trailers are, but she was just videotaping to see what SoCal Gas, and we invite SoCal Gas on anytime to discuss this. We'd love to dialogue with you. But the gas company was there. She was sort of videotaping from a public space what they were doing. And the police were called, and 3 cop cars and 5 cops descended on her. And they said, you're trespassing. And she said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, that's what we were told. She said, I can prove it to you because we're live right now on UnchainedTV. And we were able to prove it. But if they can call the cops on one well-dressed environmentalist who has simply got her cell phone out trying to document what's going on, but they can't clear dozens, even hundreds of people who are encamping on the side of the wetlands, they're doing it for a reason. They want to make the argument to the people in this area, look what a mess it is. We have to clean it up. This is their strategy, in my opinion. It seems patently obvious. And what do we tell people so that they know, don't fall for it, Marcia?
Yeah, well, I think that the public needs to continue to make phone calls to our city council member, Tracy Park, a new city council member who said, I'm going to make sure that this area is cleared so that people are able to walk at the wetlands, and that the 2-hour parking limit is complied with. So that doesn't mean that the homeless people who are living in their RVs don't have a place to go, but let's get them a place to go. And this is not the right place to go. And I do believe that Fish and Wildlife is complicit with the city council on this, because why did they, allow SoCal Gas to call 5 police officers for one person out there, and they can't do a similar thing to get the right place for these RVs to move to? I mean, you're totally right. It doesn't make sense.
It makes sense if you think about it from a cynical perspective. We are live with breaking news. This is a huge decision. A judge has just issued a ruling essentially saying that this plan to bulldoze LA's Ballona Wetlands, the last coastal wetlands in Los Angeles, approximately a square mile that's home to at least 1,700 species, including threatened and endangered species, and also is a very crucial landing spot for migratory birds. They want to bulldoze the whole thing, and they're calling it a restoration. Well, a judge put the nix on that, okay, said, hold on, and said their environmental impact report, called an EIR, was flawed. So I want to go to Bryan Pease. Now, here's another thing that doesn't make sense until you think about it from a cynical perspective. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife, isn't their mandate to protect and preserve wildlife? And yet they're one of the primary opponents who are pushing a plan that would essentially wipe out the home of, some have estimated, approximately 1 million animals, from insects to butterflies to skunks to owls to egrets to pelicans to seals.
Yeah, so CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, is supposed to protect wildlife, but they are an industry captured agency. It's a revolving door of lobbyists for the fossil fuel industry, as well as folks who have a more of a consumptive view of wildlife, rather than the majority of the public that enjoys hiking and camping and recreational viewing of wildlife. That's the vast majority of people. But then you have hunters, trappers, of course not in California because we banned trapping, but this is the mentality that animals are there to be used, and as far as the wetlands is concerned, CDFW has decided that they want to have this. They want to have a saltwater marsh there, so they're perfectly happy to just destroy everything that's there to create something completely different. Falsely label it a restoration, and in their view, that's fine because they don't. The wildlife to them is it's just capital. It's something that to be exploited, to be consumed, to be used, and it's not valued for its own inherent worth and the fact that there are animals there and species that are thriving there. They don't see animals in that way. They see them more as currency to be used and exploited, and that's the mentality of this agency.
Now, what I'd like to ask Jamie Hall is, again, I want to go about the timeline and what needs to be done. Now, they could appeal, but while they're appealing, they can't do anything, right? They can't go in with their bulldozers and continue to do this because they've been trying to do it piecemeal, is my understanding. They've tried to say, oh, we're going to do this a little bit at a time so that they can kind of continue to proceed. Is all work going to have to stop? A. B, if they appeal, how long might that take? Somebody told me with a 67-page opinion, that makes an appeal a lot harder. It's not like a 1-page opinion. It's a 67-page opinion. And number 3, timeline is really what I'm interested in.
Okay, so I guess technically there's a short window before the injunction is issued by the court where there could be some bulldozing. I think that is highly unlikely. So probably, maybe even by the end of the week, we're going to have a proposed judgment that's submitted. CDFW gets 10 days to look at it, and then we submit it to the judge, and then the judge will sign it. And that's going to have an injunction that would prohibit CDFW from engaging in any activity that would change the physical environment until they have fully complied with CEQA. And they're going to have to report back to the court. There's a thing called a return that they have to file to show the judge that they've actually complied with the ruling. They're going to have to decertify the EIR. They're going to have to rescind all project approvals. So those are just some legal mechanics. So I don't think it's likely that there's going to be any imminent destruction. Now, to get to your second question, once the judgment is signed, the other side has 60 days to file an appeal. And I've prosecuted, a variety of appeals. I won a CEQA case all the way into California Supreme Court unanimously. So I have a pretty good sense of how long it takes for an appeal to happen. So we're looking at a 12 to 18-month appeal process. It's not something that happens overnight. There's going to have to be full briefing on this, and then the Court of Appeal would order oral argument. And there is a little intermediate step. Even before we got to the Court of Appeal, either side could file a motion for reconsideration. I think it's unlikely. There has to be new information that was not known at the time of the trial, which was last week, but technically that could happen. So that's the process. And then to get to your question about I think you're asking about the likelihood of success on appeal. So I will tell you, as someone who has spent, over a decade doing this type of work, that I have never seen a 67-page single space opinion. I have never seen that ever. And so I think that Judge Chalfant really wanted to have a opinion and an analysis that would survived judicial scrutiny, and I think he succeeded. I think CDFW, they would be really bold for them to appeal this. And so I think he was trying to create some sort of bulletproof opinion. I mean, I can't get into his mind, but I think that it's highly unlikely that this is going to be reversed on appeal.
Wow, that is extremely good news. This is a huge victory, but we must remain hyper vigilant. These animals cannot speak for themselves. And I am constantly motivated to act because I see these animals every day with my own eyes. I walk around this area and I see the entrance to the Ballona Wetlands and I see the wildlife. They had claimed falsely, according to some of the hearings I attended, that, oh, the wetlands are dead. Phew, the wetlands are dead. No, they're not. And we have time-stamped photographs at defendballonawetlands.org that show these animals. All the photographs were taken inside the wetlands. And these are just a couple that I was able to gather as this breaking news came down. But there are hundreds of photographs, and you are encouraged to go look at them. Do not take our word for it. Go to defendballonawetlands.org and get involved and check out the video and the photos of these animals. So, Marcia, here's the thing that I want to know. According to you, you had said that some agency was given $500,000 to hire a company to go out and push this on the general public. And of course, they sometimes try to make themselves politically correct. And they had reached out to the BIPOC community, people of color, saying this is in their interest. And actually a news conference was held by the BIPOC community at the wetlands, led by Genesis Butler, who is related to Cesar Chavez, and a whole bunch of BIPOC leaders saying, don't destroy the wetlands and say you're doing it for us. Don't you dare use us in that manner. So that is also on defendballonawetlands.org. You can watch that. But can they still use their $500,000 to push their agenda? I just spoke to somebody the other day. See, one of the problems is it's Orwellian. It's like, oh, we want to restore the wetlands, quote unquote restoration, which is a bulldozing project.
Yeah, so some of that money's already been spent by some consultants who are meeting with tribal leaders from indigenous tribal groups, because that was one of our complaints, that the tribal leaders were not even consulted with. And this is considered a sacred site. There were more than 1,400 burials from a cemetery taken up by the Playa Vista development just across the street. So this entire area is a sacred site to the tribal indigenous people. So now the state is trying to bring them over to their side, which I don't think they will be successful at, but they're spending money trying to do that. And they also have just started this community engagement process, and they're supposed to be having a meeting next week with people of color from other parts of the county to promote this project to them. And they will not let us, other stakeholders, including people like Genesis Butler and other people of color who have been advocating against this project, they won't let us, other stakeholders who they know are opposed to the project, meet with the new people that they're trying to recruit. So,
now, wait, do we know who these people are? Could we go and protest outside this meeting?
Well, first of all, we don't know where the meeting is. We don't know when it is. We just know that they were going to have a meeting with some of us tomorrow, and it just got canceled last night, probably because of this ruling. So we're trying to learn more all the time. Most of what we learn because we have people who are activists in our community doing public records requests. And that's the only way we learn most of the information we find out. The state has not been transparent with us. We've been asking, in fact, we asked this consulting company, the one of them that's getting $250,000, we asked them, would you please ask the state to start having stakeholder meetings where we all can be in the same room together, because we have different facts that we're working with. There are something, there are alternative facts on their side, it seems. And that's a problem, because if we don't work with the same facts, we can't really have a discussion or decision on anything.
What you're telling me, and I want to interrupt you for a second because it really makes my blood boil, is that they're using public money, $500,000, to convince people that this is a good plan, even though a judge just said it was a horrible plan in a 67-page ruling. And when we asked to attend the hearings or the meetings that they're setting up, they refuse to let us attend, and they won't tell us where they're meeting or with whom, with public money.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Well, I just want to do a round robin. I know you're all very busy, and I want to thank all three of you I know are incredibly busy, but let's do a round robin on the importance of this ruling. And also, I mean, can they continue to push it when the judge just ruled against it? I just don't know how that would work. It's like, if kind of reminds me of another lawsuit that recently happened that was in the news, that somebody lost, and then they continue to argue the same case on national television, if you know what I mean. But Jamie Hall, how can maybe there's a lawsuit there, a legal action, using public money to push a plan that has been officially lambasted in a legal document, a 67-page legal document. I wonder if there's something legal that can be done there.
Well, I want to remind everybody that CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, is a procedural statute. So I always tell clients that walk into my office that it does not prevent bad choices. And your elected decision makers can do bad things. CEQA says that if they choose to do those bad things that you believe are bad, that they have to analyze the environmental impacts, they have to disclose them, they have to let everybody know what they are, and they have to mitigate them to the maximum extent feasible. So it's in large part a procedural statute. And so what the judge said here was that the EIR that CDFW did was inadequate. It had not disclosed all of the environmental impacts, and they had not committed to mitigating the environmental impacts. So everyone needs to step back and acknowledge and realize that CDFW, if they wanted to, could go and redo the EIR, and they could try to move forward with these bad decisions. Bryan started off by saying this. So everyone needs to continue. A lot of times our remedy is at the ballot box. Okay, so what needs to happen here in this case is for people to reach out to their elected leaders, especially the governor, and tell the governor that this is not what we want in order to improve the wetlands. You do not have to spend $250 million in order to make the wetlands better. There is alternatives that are on the table that would allow for progress and improvement, that wouldn't require the wholesale destruction of habitat for rare, threatened, and endangered species. So I think that that's sort of like my takeaway here. Call to action to the people that are your viewers is that we have some momentum at this point. And we need to tell the elected leaders that that they need to make a better choice. They have an opportunity here to make a better choice.
Thank you for that. That's extraordinary. I have one follow-up question. I'm sorry, but I know you're very busy, but it's burning a hole in my head. How long would it take them to redo the EIR if they decided to go that route as they go through the appeals process?
Gosh, let me get my crystal ball out. So it's hard to know, but one of the big issues that in this case was, the flood control standards that were used. And so I think that redoing the EIR is going to take at least a year, if not more. but that's just me with my crystal ball. I don't know where CDFW is with the Army Corps of Engineers. Remember, the Army Corps of Engineers was going along with this project, and they backed out. They backed out. And so CDFW needs to get in a room and discuss that issue. So I think it could take at least a year, if not longer. But really what should happen is they should not be redoing the EIR. They should be going back to the drawing board, and they should be looking at alternatives that will improve the Ballona reserve that aren't so extreme. You know, man has such hubris thinking that he can affect change. But a lot of times what we do, we don't actually achieve those results at the end of the day. And I think that that's what people intuitively realize in this particular case, is that we need to allow nature to heal. We can help nature, but we shouldn't go to such extreme ends, because that's using way too much hubris.
Sounds like you're muted, Jen.
So the battle isn't over. We correct me if I'm wrong here. There's probably going to be an appeal, but with a 67-page opinion, that's going to be very, very challenging for the opposing side. But we have to double down. We cannot just say, "Oh, victory! Yeah, we have 5 minutes to celebrate," but we got to double down. And, you know, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has called for nature-based solutions. This is not bulldozing the LA's last coastal wetlands, a habitat that's home to their estimates of 1 million animals, from insects to seals and pelicans. That is not a nature-based solution. We must start a campaign to let him know that. But then I think what the oil industry is so powerful. I'm not saying anything untoward in that matter, but what I'm saying is money talks. So does money overwrite a court decision? Flawed flood control plans? I mean, this is a densely populated area. They get the flood control plans wrong at the edge of the Pacific Ocean. My home could flood. People's homes can flood. Bryan, Pease.
That's absolutely right, and that's why the judge struck down the EIR. But let's be clear: the court's role is not to tell CDFW or the public or any other decision makers whether this is a good project or a bad project or whether it should go forward. The role of the court is simply to rule on whether they followed the California Environmental Quality Act in laying out the true environmental costs and supposed benefits of this project. So this was not 67 pages just slamming CDFW. A lot of it in there was actually deferring to CDFW on what they decided to do. There's a lot of agency discretion built into the law, and the courts are very reluctant to. They will defer to the agency, and that's actually the court's role, is to defer to the agency. And so we have to. It is a very big challenge to overcome that agency discretion, and the court ruled that we in fact did so on a couple of issues with this environmental impact report. But that doesn't mean that they can't go back and fix those things in the environmental impact report and go forward with the project. That is a political decision that's up to this elected officials. And CDFW, unfortunately, they're an agency. They're not. We can't vote on who's part of CDFW, but they are accountable ultimately to the governor's office, and we have the state legislature that can pass laws. There are different political levers that can be pushed here, but at the end of the day, this is a political decision, and all the court can do is step in when they don't follow proper procedures. As Jamie mentioned, CEQA is a procedural mechanism, and CDFW was just so arrogant in this environmental impact report, just putting whatever they wanted in there, and some of it was too extreme, and the court threw it out. But it was such a rush job too that who knows, maybe they wanted to just kind of test the waters here and see what they could get away with. And then there's a couple of things that now they can go back and fix, and yeah, it will take some time for them to do that, but don't rest on your laurels. They're coming back for more, so they're going to go another round here, so we have to stay on them and do everything we can to stop this project.
I have to ask, and we are going to wrap up, but I have to ask Marcia Hanscom. We have attended a gazillion, it feels like, California Coastal Commissions, California Coastal Conservancy hearings. They are also all behind this. And I'll just say it flat out. They don't like us when we speak, and they try to shut us up. Indeed, you sent a lawyer letter to them when you had submitted correctly a presentation outlining arguments against this fake restoration plan. They allowed another organization that's in favor of it to speak, and they cut you off. And an attorney wrote a letter to them saying that they had violated the laws in terms of how these open hearings, these public hearings should work. So they don't like us to speak. They try to shut us up. It's patently obvious. When it comes time for us to talk, all of a sudden 2 minutes is, oh, we're running out of time, 1 minute each. I mean, is this going to have an impact on the people who are in the California Coastal Commission and the California Coastal Conservancy when a judge says, hey, you got your flood control planning wrong. Hey, you didn't account for the wildlife species that this plan would decimate. Do any of them hear that? Or are they so myopic that they can't even hear it when it comes from a judge?
I think this is a wake-up call for them. I think that the state agencies have been very arrogantly thinking they can do what they want because, as the lawyer said, the law does give them a lot of discretion. But this judge is a very well-respected, very educated on the law. California Environmental Quality Act is what he rules on regularly. So he knows the law very well. And I think that his very detailed 67-page opinion is a wake-up call for the governor, for all of our elected officials, our state senators, our state assembly members, our members of Congress, all of whom have not said that they're for the project. There's not one elected official out there really promoting this project, which means we have done a good job. But now it's time for them to come our way and to say, wait a minute, if this judge said what he said, maybe it's time for us to put a stop to this. Because all of these agencies, these government officials who are making these decisions, they work for the elected officials that we put in office. And we cannot forget that these elected officials, we have to make sure they remember that they have say over these bureaucrats and that the bureaucrats are not in charge. The people are. This is a democracy and we are in charge. This is our government.
I want you to look at Defend Ballona Wetlands. There is a website, defendballonawetlands.org. This is a very small group of people who've been working very, very hard, led by Marcia Hanscom and these two amazing attorneys who are working around the clock, really giving so much of their time and effort for next to nothing. I mean, this is a labor of love. And I just want to thank certain people who have come really forward, Mick DeVudian and Jeff Hoffman, who played an extraordinary role in helping funding certain legal aspects, as well as hosting the famous party where James Cromwell declared and predicted correctly, we will win. But as the folks here have said today, we have not won the final victory. This was a battle. Those of you who care about these animals, who go, oh, when you see animals like this, and I see them every day because I live right in this neighborhood, and I could testify in a court of law. I've seen 24 pelicans playing at the mouth of the Ballona Wetlands. And that's one of the reasons I'm fighting so hard, because every day I see these animals testify to me. We're happy. We're thriving. Nature is doing for us. Sure. Has it been? Has this area? One of the arguments is, well, they put dirt from when they built the marina. They put dirt there. Yes. Virtually no aspect of the planet is untouched by human hands. But that doesn't mean you have to bulldoze the whole thing. That's another excuse. Nature heals, nature restores. And that's exactly what's happened to the wetlands. I've driven by it just in the last day, driving to LAX because I'm in New York right now. And I drove right by it. The daffodils are there. I mean, Wadsworth would be happy with the number of wildlife that's flourishing and dancing in the breeze. And yet they continue to maintain that this area is dead. It is not. We need all of you to come together and to rise up, because what happens in LA spreads to LA. And if we can stop it here, we can stop these phony restorations that are happening all over the United States and the world as developers look at wild lands and they get itchy fingers and they want to figure out a way to make money off it. And that's the whole point. We are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. We cannot afford to destroy everything on the altar of making money. It's going to kill us, and then our money won't amount to a hill of beans. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to our heroic attorneys and the equally heroic Marcia Hanscom, who works around the clock, making this happen, doing all the research. Thank you so much. You're all my heroes. And everybody out there, get involved. Go to defendballonawetlands.org. Join our team. Sign up for the newsletters. We're going to ask you to testify before the Coastal Commission, before the California Department of Fish and Wildlife hearings, before the Coastal Conservancy hearings, to go to protests, to come to parties. These animals cannot speak for themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank
See
you.
you next time. And please download the Unchained TV app. We are the world's only free streaming nonprofit network for animals, for the climate, for sustainability, and to mitigate the climate apocalypse, which includes the sixth mass extinction that we're currently in the midst of, and that this plan would certainly accelerate. Thank you so much. Bye.